Hello, good evening. Welcome to Shadow Tea Tuesdays. Y'all know what day it is, right? It's the wonderful Tuesday. Aren't we so happy to see Tuesdays? Like, it's starting to be my favorite day of the week. Almost. Just a little bit. No, just kidding. But anyway, how are you doing? I hope you are doing well. I hope everything is going okay in your neck of the woods. And, yes, I'm by myself today. But hey, that don't stop the that don't stop the show. Mm-mm. That don't stop the show. It doesn't stop the show at all. And so I'm so happy that you are here with me on Strategy Tuesdays. I'm you so used to saying we, but I'm gonna say we as if somebody's with me, so it's okay. So just bear with me on that one, okay? But anyways, I just want to say that hold on, let me move this around real quick. I need some assistance. Y'all, I'm gonna have to hire some assistants that don't want to get paid. I'm just joking. But anyways, so I don't know if you can see my little sticker. Can y'all see my little sticker? I know TikTok can see my sticker, but I hope that everybody can see my sticker. So if you don't know what today is, I mean, I'm in Oklahoma, so I don't know in your neck of the woods if it's time for you to vote or not. I mean, I know different states have different things, but you should have been voting somewhere around in this month. If not, it may have been last month, because November is like right around the corner. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. If if you're ready to have that conversation, are you ready? Are you ready to have a conversation? So my question to you is, did you vote? No, you didn't vote. So did you vote today or last week or whenever your voting was in your neck of the woods? Did you vote? Is the question. And if you didn't vote, why didn't you? Hmm. I ain't no judgment. I'm not judging. I'm not here to judge nobody. I'm not judging nobody. I'm just asking a simple question. Did you vote? And if you didn't vote, why didn't you vote? I mean, I would like to know if you could share that with me or why you didn't vote. Just help me understand because voting comes a long way, and I understand everybody has their rights and everybody has their own opportunities of when they want to do certain things. And I respect that. You know, Power to the people, right? Empowering the people. But with voting rights, it's a very long history of voting rights. So, I mean, I can just take you through a little journey real quick. You probably already know this through your history lesson. Back when you were in school or whenever, whenever that you may have learned this. But I just want you to think about something for a minute. If you don't exercise your right to vote, then what are you exercising? Did y'all hear that? Y'all heard them crickets? them crickets in there. Yes. So if you're not exercising your right to vote, then what are you exercising? It's the same way that if you don't use it, you lose it. Y'all heard that before. So if I don't exercise my body, if I don't move my body, what happens to my body? If I'm not up walking or doing things, moving my muscles and all that, what happens to it? It just. So I just want you to think about this voting. Now, I know my range of friends and followers that I have come from different ethnicities and backgrounds and the whole the whole nine yards. I appreciate that. But I want you to understand the struggle for voting rights goes way beyond than just me and you or your neighbor or your pastor. It goes way beyond all of that. All of that. It goes way beyond all of that. So the struggle for voting, equal voting rights, date back to the early, 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 early parts of United States history, like way, 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 way back. And of course, we all know, who was here and all this stuff. That's not the point that we're trying to get to. But when they first started to talk about voting, voting was only allowed to white individuals. Oh, let me rephrase that. I don't want to say individuals. White men that own property. So if you had some land and that you got from other people or whatever, and you are Caucasian, then you're able to vote. So by you having that land and by you being Caucasian, you have the power to make laws and all these other things, right? So then what happens to everybody else? Because everybody else wasn't just not on Earth. I mean, we were on Earth at that time. So, back in that time, things were looked at quite differently. And that's what I kind of want you to think about when you are starting not to vote. Because some people say, well, they're going to do what they want to do. They have and they already are. Okay. But that's not the point. You have been granted, and I like to say granted or given the opportunity to exercise your right to vote, but then you don't want to use it. Hmm. So, I excuse me. There was this article, and when I have time, I like to try to read up on some stuff and just kind of refresh my memory because it really helps. Because you can't remember everything nowadays, and I can't. So I like to refresh my memories and be like, oh, okay, that is true. So, you have the founders of the United States. And so they accepted and they endorsed this severe limits on voting. So remember, you had to be Caucasian and you had to have some property. And so if you didn't really necessarily have those things, then you don't really have any say so in what's going on, right? And so when they started to leave it up to the states to decide, okay, how you're going to vote in elections and all of this. So then the states started to I'm about to say watch, but the states started to restrict voting to certain individuals. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this is going on to the 1800s because that was back in the 1700s, but now we're going on to the 1800s, and so now we have to start putting up different barriers of who can do this and who can do that. Uh, and this is the part that that I don't want to say bothers me, but I think I'm gonna stick with that word. It bothers me because as you get into the reconstruction period and the civil war and all of that, right? And then of course the emancipation and all these different things. So all these things have happened, but if you remember back in that time frame, we as African Americans were not supposed to be reading. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember that? Okay. So if you are illiterate, then you can't read the ballot anyway. I mean, let's just be honest. If you are illiterate, you can't even read the ballot anyway. So why would you even want to go vote? Hmm. So what it does is during this time, and we're still in like the 1800s. Um, many states, mainly in the South and some others, they use different barriers to prevent African American men from voting because once again, you can't read or you ain't supposed to be reading. Okay, so let's just move on a little bit further. Moving on. All these different voter suppression. I mean, there's so many different voter suppression efforts that has happened. And so I want you to be able to understand that history repeats itself. You've probably heard this before from your mom, your grandpa, and several other people. But history repeats itself. It may not be the exact history, but it's in the same way in some type of form. Now, moving into the 1920s, you know, women are fighting for their rights to be able to vote. Women, hello. So at that time, only the men can make the decisions. Well, I mean, we're not gonna get into that. Let's stay focused. We're not gonna get into that. But only the men can make the decisions. So they don't want the women to come and share what you thought about voting, because that's not your place. Now, to just go there. That's not your place. So you don't need to tell us or share your rights to vote, because you should let us handle this. All right. So, going into the 1920s, the women have won the right to vote. And finally, we are able to come and exercise our right to vote. And we're like, yes, finally, we can make some decisions. Because just like you, we want to be able to exercise our right to vote. I mean, you shouldn't be the only one. I'm just saying. So, as we continue to go through the decades, my little paper there. So, as we continue to go through the decades of voter suppression, you have the 1920s, the women win the vote. They start to be able to vote. And then we go further on down 40 years later into the 60s. Some of you may have been born back in the 60s. So you understand how difficult it was or it is to vote. Uh, my parents were born back in the 50s. So they always told us, and I say us speaking as my me and my siblings, they always told us about the hardships of being able to vote and what their parents, well, my grandparents, um, instilled in them, making sure that, hey, you get out and vote, because what we had to go through back then is twice as harder than it is now. And this is back in the 50s. Okay. So now we're going into the 1960s, and you know what the 1960s were, right? You know what was going on during that time. So the southern states and ramped up barriers to vote, because now we have what kind of rights going on? hmm Now I just want you to roll with me while we're going through this voter suppression train, okay? Because you may didn't want to vote today. And that's fine. Power to the people. So when we go into the 60s, and then we go into 1964, where the 24th Amendment targets poll taxes, right? So you have all these different amendments and laws that are coming into place. And then you have the Congress, what was that they passed? I can't get my words together. The Voting Rights Act passed Congress. Y'all know about that, right? They keep having to read. Oh, okay, I won't talk about that. But anyway, I just want you to look that up if you don't know much about it. But that Voters' Right Act passed back in Congress back in 1965. I'm trying to remember some of the years. 1965. So in 1965, now we have the Voters' Right Act. And you know what was going on back in 1965? You know, the civil rights march, and all that stuff. Okay. I just want you to just think about the time of era, okay? The era of time and how it plays a part into different things that are happening. So after 1965, we're gonna roll on into the 70s. I like the 70s. Well, the later part of the 70s. But anyway, we're gonna roll on to the 70s, where you have the 26th Amendment that lowered the age range of voting to 18. Now that's just in 1971. Now some of you were probably just recently, not recently, but were born in 1971. So you're like, oh, really? Yes. In 1971, when you turned 18, you were just allowed to be able to vote. So now that's why they push it so hard to say, hey, when you turn 18, you're about to graduate from high school, or if you're still in high school, hey, you need to register to vote. You're 18. That's a right that you have as an American citizen, right? Okay. So then we move on to 1975. So you got the Voters' Right Act is expanded to protect language minorities. So this is to focus on certain cultures, Spanish or I shouldn't say Spanish, Hispanic or any type of Asian language barriers that they may need to be able to read the ballots. If the ballots are all in English and I need some help, how am I going to read the ballot? So this is more so to expand to protect the language of the minorities. So moving on further, we're going into 70. What year was that? 75. So 1982, the Congress has required new voting protections for people with disabilities. Now you know how many people are disabled? Several. So they have to have the same protection as going out to vote because sometimes they may not be able to get there. They may not be able to physically walk into the poll to vote. You didn't think about that, did you? Okay. And don't say they shouldn't vote if they're disabled. That's not fair because anything can happen to you and you can become disabled just like that. And now you have to adjust. I'm just saying. Anyways, let me move on. So, what year was that? 1982. I'm trying to look at my notes. 1982. So 1982, we're writing protection for people with disabilities, and then 1993, you have the motor voter becomes a law. So allowing voters to register for uh, at their motor vehicle department. So that was, it used to. I don't know if you can still. I think you still can. Like if you go to the tag agency or the DMV, you can register to vote there, right? And that was just in what year was that? 93. Now just look at all these different little things that has happened in these timelines. I'm like, that wasn't that long ago. 1993 wasn't that long ago at all. But making sure that you're able to register to vote is important. It is. So some people move, they relocate. They may have a new job where their job takes them to not another city, but another town or another state. And so they have to be able to register where they are. Now, each state has their own law that, you got to be living there for so long before you can register. Now, you can look that up, but that's a totally different ballgame. But anyways, so moving on to the 2000s. Now, what year are we in? 2022. So only 22 years ago. So in the 2000s, the presidential elections problems spotlighted a need for reform. Y'all remember that? Y'all don't remember that. Okay. It's all right. But that they felt like it needed to be reformed. Why did it need to be reformed? Hmm. Moving on. So then 13 years later, the Supreme Court strike a blow to the Voters' Rights Act in June. Now, that Voters' Right Act is only I can't remember how many it's only good for. I can't remember. But the Congress always have to redo those. So what happens if they let that go? What happens if they don't re-sign, or that may not be the right term, but what happens if they don't redo the Voters' Right Act? I mean, what happens? Nothing. Do you think nothing? Or do you think it would go back to how it was originally? I mean, I don't think people really think that far. I really don't. But anyways, I'm gonna move on. I don't wanna. I don't wanna. How much time I take? Ooh, I talk a lot. I don't want to. I don't want to take up a lot of time. But I want you to just think about this for a minute. Okay. So then, when you move on to 2014, the voters' right movement, they start to fight with the suppression. 2014, because you know what happened in 2014. Now, keep in mind, every election, they are always focused on we need to focus on the youth and we also need to focus on minorities, right? There's a reason that they focus on those group of individuals. For one, 18-year-olds are they're always growing. So, of course, every year somebody's going to turn 18. So they need to make sure that they start focusing on them like, hey, you need to exercise your right to vote, you know. And of course, children are like, well, who do I vote for? Do I vote for the person who I've seen the commercials the most on TV? Or do I vote for who my mom and dad tell me to vote for? Or who do I vote for? It's kind of, and when you're 18, do you really know politics? Some of them probably do, but majority of them probably do not. But I just want you to think about this because then moving on to 2016, now we're starting to hear that there's, false claims of, well, there's false claims of fraud and voters fraud and voter this and all this other stuff, right? So then there's one issue after another, and then you go into 2018 where the state and local officials are putting up some newer barriers to voting. So if you notice that now your ID has to be maybe a real ID. Well, what's a real ID? Did I already have a fake ID? Because everything on this ID is me. I'm just saying. But just think about it. Like they keep putting more barriers up. Every time you turn around, there's new things. Now, at first, when you're going to college, most college students sometimes they may or may not have a driver's license, or they may have an ID. They may just have a student ID, but you have to have a driver's license, or you have to have a state ID. Well, what if I'm from Michigan and I'm going to OU? I don't have an Oklahoma ID. So then does that mean I can't vote? Just think about that. Okay. So there are things that's called like absentee ballots, which are really good for college students, especially if you want to continue to vote in your state. But if you are moving or you are relocating and you're no longer there, then it's probably best for you to get to know where you are right now. So if you are in a new state and you plan on staying there, to get to know the political realms of the new state, because you need to know their laws. You're living there, you need to know what's going on. So, anyways, so let me move on to 2018. So 2018, we had a record number of voters, but then there's a problem. There's still problems with voters fraud and voters suppression and the long line of voters, people's names being uh, removed from the ballot, not the ballot, the registration list. Because when you go to check in for you to vote, they have your name on the list. Now, one thing I want you to remember is if you decide that you only want to vote every 4 years or every 8 years or uh, every 10 or 12 years, your name is not going to continue to be on that voter registration. It's not. I'm just telling you that. So if the last time you voted was back in 2012, your name has been removed. I'm just saying. I can't say that this is for all states, but I can definitely let you know that for the state of Oklahoma, they will remove your name. So they'll consider you inactive. So if you decide, let's say if you're homebound and you're not able to physically go into um, uh, the voting polls, then you can ask for absentee ballots. They'll mail it right to your home. So all you got to do, read it, follow the instructions, and send it right on back. Real simple. I know that a lot of people didn't know that if you are in the hospital, let's say, well, today is like election day. So let's say I ended up going to the hospital yesterday and I'm in the hospital today and I want to vote. So I can easily let I'm going to say Oklahoma because that's where I am, but the Oklahoma Election Board, I can easily let them know that I'm not physically able to go to vote. So I can assign someone to go and pick up my ballot. It's a form that you fill out. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a form that you fill out that says that you're in a hospital or you in some kind of capacity where you're not able to do it. And that person who you assign, so let's say I assign my husband, he would go and get it, bring it back to me at the hospital. I fill it out and he turn it in. Just that easy. But some people that are in the hospital, they just think, oh, darn, I done missed the vote and I can't vote. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's just the point of knowing what to do, who to contact, and make sure that you have someone that can be, I'm going to say advocate, someone that can be an advocate for you because you're not physically able to go and get the ballot. So, of course, somebody has to go and do it for you and to return it. Now, moving on to 2019, just recent, right? So, voter rights groups once again prepare for the census, redistricting, districting. I can't talk. Okay, and the 2020 election. So, what happens with this redistricting? I can't talk today, but you know what I'm trying to say. They restructuring things, right? Do you understand that after the census, because a lot of people don't like to do the census, I don't want to fill that out. I don't want to fill that out. The government gonna know where I am. He don't need to know my business. They gonna be knowing all of this, and they don't need to know what's going on in my house. They don't. I'm just telling you what I've heard people say. Okay, so when people don't fill out those census, what happens? One or two things happen. Either you grow in number, like, oh, all these new people have moved to this area. We have at least 20,000 more people. Maybe not that many, but you have X amount of thousand of people or hundreds. It could be a few in a new town, right? Or, man, it has reduced some. We don't have this district, is not as big. So then, based off the census, in return comes, oh, we need to redistrict this. It's too many people in this area. Oh, it's too many social economic status in this area. We need to redistrict this and then make this line over here. So you notice that, and if you've been paying attention, you notice that maybe your precinct has changed, or maybe your district has changed, or maybe they've added on another position as a political office because you have more people, or either you have less people. So you may think that those census is like, oh, I don't want to fill that out. But it plays a part into voting. It plays a part. Now, so the voter turnout rates from 1916 to 2018, there's been a big change with that. I know you can't. I got this off of Carnegie Corporations of New York. You guys really need to go and look at their read their article, and they have an article that talks about the voter rights. No, voter. What is it called again? I'm about to mess it up. I'm gonna say voters on fire, voter on fire, something of that nature. You need to go and look it up and just read it, and you'll be like, oh, okay. So if you look at the midterm elections and then you look at the presidential elections, you would see there's a big difference there. I'm trying to post this on my social media so you can kind of see the the change in the numbers, because it seems like people tend to vote more when it's presidential election versus when it's midterm election. Well, why you don't vote for the midterm? What do you think you don't think that part's important? I mean, it is. Anyways, it is. So there is a documentary out there. I think it's called Voter Suppression. I can't even remember the name of it. But anyway, I watched it was it last year or 2020? I can't even remember when it came out. Goodness gracious. Anyways, it's really good. Just go and Google voter suppression documentary or voter suppression movie or something like that. And it'll pull it up. There you go. And just watch it. And then when you look at that, then you'll get an understanding of what I'm talking about. All right. So I want to share this last little bit before I let you go. This last little bit before I let you go. Just a couple of highlights, because it talks about some key tools to battling voter rights suppression. So if we already have the rights, why are you trying to suppress them? And I mean, I can't necessarily answer for them, but how I feel like they're wanting to suppress them is because you don't want the people to be too powerful. But you do have the power. I'm just saying. Anyways, but the first part to battling voter rights suppression is advocacy. You making sure that you're advocating for people. If you know someone that wants to vote and they haven't voted in a while, or if you know someone that may have had a felony and they would like to vote, there are certain states that allow felons to vote depending on how long ago their felony was. Now, I can't speak for I can't speak for all the states because that's not my job. But I just want you to look into it, because there are some people that had a felony over 20 some years ago and think that they can't vote. And 9 times out of 10, they probably can. So, anyways, I'm just going to move on from that. But I want you to advocate for someone to help them expand, understanding the expansion of voters' rights. If you want to work at a to work at the poll, I always said I wanted to do that. I haven't signed up to do it yet, but I encourage you to do it. Even though I haven't done it yet, but I encourage you to do it. So one day I'm going to do it, and I'm quite sure I'm going to be um, shocked by a couple of things. But making sure that you have like an election assistance, because like I talked about earlier, language can sometimes be a barrier. If people are not able to fully understand what they're doing, they may need some type of assistance. So election assistance from language, that's more of a language issue with people of minorities or individuals that have a disability. Okay. So also election monitoring. You've heard of that before, where you can like monitor the elections to see what all is going on, making sure that all equal rights are being done uh, like they're supposed to be. Get out to vote, having the get out to vote drives. I'm constantly always saying, hey, you need to get out to vote. You need to go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote. Hey, Do that. Go vote. You probably seen even if people at Walmart say, "Hey, are you registered to vote? Are you registered to vote?" And some people say, "Yeah, I am registered to vote." You know you ain't registered. Stop it. And if you haven't voted since 2014, you're not registered anymore. Remember, they do like a clean sweep. I'm just telling you. But anyways, so another thing is organizing with different ambassadors or different there may be nonprofit organizations that's making sure that you go out there and in the community and making sure that you go out there and vote, taking the time to make sure that your name is on the list because you don't want to go to the polls the day of and they say your first and last name and then you say Bob Dylan and then they say, oh, you're not on here. Because by the time they say you're not on here, it's too late. You can't vote that day. So make sure you go and check that list. Check the list. You go to your website, go to your state website, and it'll pull it up on there for you. I think. Well, no, I didn't share. I shared it on my social media. But last, what was it in June? The last time we voted, before this runoff right here. I think it was in June. I can't remember what month it was. But anyways, they had a little scan code. And they say, hey, you can check and see if you're registered to vote. So, while you're sitting there waiting in line, because my precinct had changed, because I had mentioned that on my social media, I scanned a little thing and I was like, you're just wasting time. So I'm putting my number in there. And I was like, oh, and it was blank. It was like, you can't find you. I said, what? Said, oh no, I know that's wrong, right? So I exit out again, rescan it, put my little stuff in there, hit center. What? It still said you could. Now by that time, I'm getting closer to the poll worker, and she said, "How you doing today?" I said, "Well, I was doing fine till I hit this code." And she said, "Oh, okay. Well, tell me your name." And I told her my name, and she looked it up, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you're right here." I said, "Okay, okay." Because listen, Vernelia was about to have an attitude. I'm not even gonna lie, because I was like, I'm scanning, and I'm putting my information in here, and it ain't popping up, and I was getting offended, and that was hurting my soul because I know I go to vote faithfully faithfully. So always make sure that you do your research and your data. Okay, because things are constantly changing. You may only hear, so if you only watch the local news, you only may hear like a little snippet of different things that's happening with this voter suppression rights and all this other things. But if you are really one of those people that really pay attention and understanding the underlining tone of things that's going on, you will be surprised. So once again, I want you to go to Voter Suppression. It's a movie or a documentary. Look it up on Google, and I want you to watch that. I encourage you to watch it as a family. I really do, because it's important for your children to understand the history of voting. Okay, it's not just, hey, I'm just going out here to vote for the red. Oh, I'm just going out here to vote for the blue. Oh, I'm just going out here to vote for independent. No, it's not just, we're just not just colored into circles. We ain't in kindergarten, we're an adults, and so we are making decisions based on what we want individuals to do for us as a society. And some of us, we just kind of forget. We just kind of forget, and we just be like, they're gonna do whatever they want to do, so just let them do it. What? It's a reason that I was born in the late 70s. It's a reason, because I truly believe if I was born any other time before then, I probably wouldn't have made it. I'm just saying. So I encourage everyone, to make sure that you exercise your right to vote. Just like I say, if you don't use it, you lose it. So just like if you haven't voted in several, y'all didn't tell me my hair is sticking up. If y'all, sorry, lost focus. Just like if you haven't voted in the last several years, you will lose your name on that little piece of registry saying that you are registered to vote. Because they're like, oh, well, they ain't voted in 6 years, so we just took them all. They're considered inactive. And I remember I can't remember what year it was, but they did a segment on the news, on the local news, and they said there were over 25,000 names that were removed from voter registration. 25,000 names. That's a whole town, a whole city. So, but that's how many people had not been voting. And they say if you haven't been voting recently, then they just take your name off. Just remove your name off. They're not worried about voting. So I encourage you to make sure that you know how to vote. You know how to vote, you know when to vote. Make sure you vote at your midterm elections, not just for the president. There's people that come way before the president that are more important. I shouldn't say that more important, but they are important as well. So it's not just about the president. It's about the steps between the presidential election. So anytime that I go vote, I always think of my grandfather. And I do because he's always told me stories of him, working on the railroads and doing things and making sacrifices for his family, and not being able to finish certain education opportunities and all this other stuff because the family was a top priority. And to me, I always kept that with me. I always kept that with me. My grandfather was a hard worker until he just couldn't do it anymore. And he still tried. Even if he couldn't, he still tried. But I always think of him anytime I go to vote because during that time, he really wasn't able to vote. I'm just, oh, let me stop because I'm going to get too emotional. But during that time, he wasn't really able to vote. So when he's raising my parents, that is drilled in them. Do you understand? I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. That is drilled in them that you make sure that you do your part, because we weren't able to do our part because we weren't given that opportunity. So make sure you do your part. So I just encourage you to do your part. If you didn't go today, that's all right. Or maybe it's your time next week. I don't know when it's your time to vote in your state. But whenever it is, hey, exercise your right to vote. Exercise your right to vote. Exercise your right to vote. If you don't use it, you lose it. And trust me, when we all vote, it just makes the world a little bit better. It lets people know and hear and understand, like, hey, we're not just falling for the okey doke. We're not just falling for anything that you just throw out a magic hat and put some little fairy dust on it. No, 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 no. Come on now. That's just me. Let me stop preaching. I feel like I'm preaching a little bit. Sorry. But anyways, I appreciate you taking the time to join Share the Tea Tuesdays. I hope that you have learned something today or given you just a little bit more insight and just to think of things a little bit different. Um, if you don't remember, I did share with you last week that September is very important to me. And of course, it's very important. But if you know anyone that is an ovarian cancer survivor, I would love to feature you on my podcast or even just on my social media page. So follow me at Share the Tea with V at any of my platforms. I'm on all of them except for Snap of the Chat. And I encourage you, if you are a breast cancer survivor or if you would like to honor anyone that had breast cancer, to please submit their information my way and I will honor them as well. And of course, I do want to say next Tuesday is a conversation that you will not be ready for. I'm going to give you a warning now. Do you have your affairs in order? I know y'all like, what? Affairs? What you mean? Do you have your affairs in order? If something happened to you right now, do you have everything that you need prepared? Does your family know what to do? Does your family know, um, I mean, where you're going to be buried? Do your family know your rights? Do your family know your last wishes? I mean, this is a conversation that you're not going to want to have. And I'll be truthful. And I'm not even going to say us as black people, but people in general, they try to avoid having these conversations until it's too late. So I have a special guest next week. And yes, she is my line sister. Yes, from way back in the day. Don't worry about that. But Miss Tremaine, she is going to share with us. Um, I'm going to say her story, her journey, and how she come to running her business. And I really appreciate if you would tune in with us next week with Share the Tea Tuesdays. Okay? Brace yourself. You're going to do fine. We all learning new things as we go. So, once again, thanks for following. Don't forget to follow me on Share the Tea. And remember, be intentional, be insightful, and definitely be impactful. You have a blessed day. Bye.